Welcome, everyone. Jim Clark here at the Synchronicity Sanctuary in Central Virginia to share another contemplative focus with you today in the hopes that it might encourage you to meditate more or to begin meditation, to begin a self exploration to discover the depths of your own being. So, the focus that will help us get to that point will be beyond the thinking mind, the fullness of life is realized. Better than dominion over the world, better than going to heaven, is the joy of one who enters the river of life that leads to non being. So, in my journey here over the many years that I've been here at the Synchronicity Sanctuary with my teacher, we had a shorter contemplation that was drawn out of the history of contemplations just like this one. All is one, one is the many is one. So essentially what it's saying is that there is only one consciousness, one source, one life. And we're all sharing that life. But to experience that, to actually tap into that, one must go through a journey of disengaging from a false identity, the ego, not to destroy it, not to judge it, but to be able to move beyond it. So, in that journey, you use contemplations like this that point to a more fundamental reality that we all share so that we can actualize the experience of that reality as we are also simultaneously experiencing ourselves as a human being on earth as a separate expression, a separate person. So separation and unity coexist. This is a fundamental law that has been brought out in ancient traditions and continues today, where the simultaneous existence of seeming opposites is what they create each other. In other words, up creates down, good creates bad, health creates sickness, you name it. It's just the fundamental mechanics of existence in this level of the game. So to tap into the kind of experience that this contemplation is pointing to, one must journey through their own identifications and their own belief systems and their own investment in that. Because we're enculturated from the very beginning, from birth. We are enculturated to believe that we are a name that's given to us, that we are a boy or a girl. We're believing that we're a human being separate, but we belong to a family. And then we go to school and we learn, and these kind of enculturations begin to broaden out to more generalized things like your country, your culture, and so forth and so on. So we accumulate all these different beliefs, and through those beliefs we also identify with them. We either accept them or we reject them, but rarely do we seriously question them. So to reach the experience that this contemplation is pointing to is really an ultimate freedom. And on the journey to that, on your way to that, meditation is what pulls you into the perspective that can go beyond the mind, that opens up the possibility of experiencing something of more of what you are, to put it bluntly. And it does this by calming the mind, first of all, because it gradually calms itself down so that the thinking process isn't so chaotic and so dominating. Because the external polarity of our existence, the exterior to our being, is by default dominant. So we're always looking outside of ourselves to compare ourselves, to judge ourselves, to assess ourselves. And out of all this, because of the limitations of that kind of a perspective during life, as we live life, judgment comes and conflict comes naturally because we're not really being true to who we are. And so we project all of our conflicts out onto the world, and then as a collective, we generate conflicts collectively. So in order to neutralize that kind of a process and to discover something more that we all share, something positive, something loving, something ultimate, one must examine and question, and at the same time you must be open to the possibility that such an existence is real. And to do that takes a lot of practice and a lot of process. And it's not something for the faint-hearted. You are going to be challenged in this process if you take it long enough and deep enough. But really, it's just, it's what's happening. It's the only thing that's really happening here, and that is the evolution of consciousness itself in the human form. So, in my progress, when I first began to meditate, I would have momentary breakthroughs where I'd have what we would call phenomenal experiences that were kind of otherworldly, but beyond normal, for sure, and highly symbolic, where things like oceans and vast fields of snow and things symbolic of source, consciousness, that would be the background of where I would be in these momentary visions. And along with the visions and these breakthrough moments, I would also experience a very powerful, blissful me, okay? And it would just be overwhelming. And it would last for a while, but it wouldn't be constant. Gradually, it would shift to my default norm, or try to anyway. So this kind of a process is the most challenging process for most people who meditate, because if you don't have the guidance and the understanding of what you're working with and the rules of the game and why you experience what you experience and get out of the judgment of it, then most likely it's going to take you out of the game, because you'll just get overwhelmed by the negativity that comes out of you that you inherited either from your enculturation, or could be past lives, could be genetic. But nonetheless, we have to go through that process to kind of clear the way so that we can open up to our hearts. And it's the heart and the intelligence that comes through the heart that can open us up and render that kind of experience that this contemplation is pointing to. So it's a process that I've been engaged with for over 30 years here, and at this point I do have a very consistent experience energetically of a more joyful, loving, and accepting me, but it is not egotistic. It includes my ego, because I have to have one to be a human being, but it's the play. It's the play of one simultaneous to the other. And as I go through my process, the realization that both are perfectly good, that they need to be there for me to evolve, and a goal which I had in the very beginning of meditation which was to be illuminated, to be enlightened, whatever that might mean, kind of fades away, because what you realize in the process, if you stay with it long enough, is that it's a process that unfolds gradually. Because if you went from being identified with a human being all the way to be fully enlightened in a moment, it would just be too much, and you could not remain in the form of a human being and do that. So that's just the rules of the game, and that's how it's being played, and that's what's happening. Now, many people are journeying journeys that we would call the negative polarity, where they're gaining enough experience of egocentric identity and the suffering that comes with that to be fulfilled in that experience, to the point where they'll be ready to move on to the other polarity, which is the positive polarity, which is where the unfolding of the essence of who you are begins. And that's a big step in human evolution and individual evolution, spiritual speaking. And it comes on usually as a big surprise and in the form of some form of awakening where you are given the experience of the depths of your being for a moment. And in that, the power of that is beyond description, which is what I had in my experience in my life. But that's really where the journey begins. It doesn't end there. It's not like one minute you're unaware and the next moment you are aware. I mean, you're aware of more, but the understanding of it and the integration of it, that is what takes a long time, because there's a lot of information that we hold on to in subtler dimensions, mental dimensions, emotional dimension, physical dimension, and beyond, that are not congruent with the truth of who we are, as we put it here. So when you meditate and you bring yourself to a peak experience, you have these moments where you're experiencing a more loving, accepting you. Then as a result of those experiences, incongruent beliefs and so forth that you still hold energetically, mentally, and so forth, emotionally, will surface to be cleared. And that's what the process is. It comes through your awareness in kind of an indirect way that way. But it can be uncomfortable, and it can be somewhat disconcerting at times, because it seems like it's the opposite of what you should be experiencing for meditation. But really, it's a confirmation that your meditation is really working. If you don't have those kind of experiences and you are meditating, then it's not taking you quite deep enough to unlock the depths of yourself to the point where that process can be experienced as I just described it. So I remember when I first started to meditate many years ago, back in the 70s, I didn't use the technology as synchronicity meditation back in that day. I didn't know about synchronicity back then, but I did use other forms of meditation, your general kinds, like staring at a candle, or just plain sitting and watching my breath, or trying to hold a positive thought, all kinds of things like this. And then I moved on to Sufi Meditations, where I had a specific contemplation similar to this one, but out of that tradition, where I was focused on love. A lot of their meditations were really pointed straight to love, and the love that you are, the love that we are. And I found that those were very cathartic for me, because they were more directly pointing to the kind of focus that I needed to have to generate the process, what we call a fivefold process here, where all this incongruent data in the form of feelings, thoughts, sometimes physical symptomology will come up, and it will come up sometimes very strongly. And all you can do is watch it. This is what you do when you meditate. You watch what's happening without judgment, without engagement. You just watch it. You become a witnessing consciousness to it. And as you develop that ability to be a witness to the happenings of your consciousness, then you become more and more a witness to everything in your life. And then you become non-judgmental. You don't generate more data about things. You look at it and you may want to question where it came from, and some of the life experiences you might investigate to see where that came from, and some of it you may never know where it came from, but it's really not that important. What's important is that it comes, it's cleared, and then you're ready to move on and go even deeper into yourself, into the truth of yourself, where the loving being that you are by your own nature begins to unfold in your awareness. And as you witness that part of yourself, then you all have non-phenomenal experiences where one of the experiences that I have a lot of is absence, which is like I just go out. It's not like sleep because it's not sleeping, but it is removing myself from the physical experience of who I am as a human being and entering into non-being. There's nothingness. And the fullness of emptiness, as we call it here, is the realization and experience of the love that you are from that experience. And then I go into these, and then I come back out, and I'm back in my body, awareness-wise. And it's just how I grow, and it's how many people grow when they use meditation as a lifestyle, and a holistic lifestyle that helps to support that process, which is basically maintaining a healthy body and keeping your mind focused for the most part on positive things, right? Truthful statements like the one that we're sharing here. And then you devote yourself to a focus like that, and then you begin to generate the experience that such a focus gives you. Whereas before, unconsciously, you were focused most of the time on the exterior world, and you were doing it through a thinking mind. And through the thinking mind, you're doing comparisons and judgments and evaluations and so forth. And you get lost in that process, and that process just by its own nature is negative, so you're not going to feel great, right? You're going to have moments where you're very angry and you're very judgmental, and your relationships just seem to go from one where you experience love to one where you experience its opposite, and then it just goes on and on that way until somehow you wake up to that you're actually creating your experience because of your focus. It's not anything else, because the power that's in you, the truth of who you are, is powerful, very powerful. But it's not understood or recognized until you reach a point in your own evolution where you're ready to move through that process, where you have to become aware of that, and you're able to develop the witnessing consciousness that you are. So that's essentially what I wanted to share with you today. To enter into the fullness of life experience is to enter into experiencing life not through the mind, not through a conceptual framework, but rather directly. You experience life for what life really is, and life really is source, consciousness. It's what everything is. And when you reach that point, you're there, you're home. So I hope that this helps you in some way or stimulates you in a positive way to take yourself in that direction more and more. And until next Monday, I'll leave you with what I've shared today, and hope that it does leave a positive imprint in your life. Thank you so much.